Hello, everyone. My name is Lynette Roth, and I'm Daimler Curator of the Busch-Reisinger Museum and head of the Division of Modern and Contemporary Art at the Harvard Art Museums. And it is my great pleasure to welcome you, our fellows, to today's sneak peek at our forthcoming book, Object Lessons, the Bauhaus and Harvard. Really the first time that this book will be presented more publicly than within the Harvard Art Museum's staff circles. So very exciting event today. Before we begin, we wish to pay tribute to the original inhabitants of the land that Harvard resides on through the reading of a formal land acknowledgement. The Harvard Art Museums acknowledge that Harvard University is situated on the traditional and ancestral territory of the Massachusetts people, and we strive to honor this relationship. And so while we cannot be together at the museum right now, we are grateful and continue to be grateful for these virtual opportunities to connect with you, fellows of the Harvard Art Museums, our closest friends and supporters. And on behalf of the curatorial team, I just want to say that it means so much that you have stayed engaged with us in this way. And I really want to thank you for your continued generosity during these difficult times. Your support touches every aspect of the museum, of the work that we do, and all of our staff members. And I don't think I need to tell you that that is more important now than ever before, especially as we approach the year's end. And so if you haven't renewed your support for the Harvard Art Museums yet, we certainly hope that you will consider doing so. It's a good time on that note to mention that the project you're about to hear about today, the 2019 Bauhaus exhibition and related programming that really has been brought together in the publication that we're going to hear about, that this long-term project would not have been possible without your ongoing support and that of the German Friends of the Busch-Reisinger Museum, as well as endowed funds from the Daimler Curatorship of the Busch-Reisinger Museum Fund, the Charles L. Kuhn Endowment Fund, the M. Victor Leventritt Lecture Series Endowment, the Richard L. Menschel Endowment Fund, and the Care of the Busch-Reisinger Museum Collections Endowment Fund. The publication that we're going to hear about is supported by the Harvard Art Museum's Mellon Publication Funds, including the Carola B. Terwilliger Bequest. And modern and contemporary art programs at the Harvard Art Museums are also made possible by generous support from the Emily Rao Pulitzer and Joseph Pulitzer Jr. Fund for Modern and Contemporary Art. And I know this is always a mouthful and it's a lot, but I think it really shows the true legacy of our supporters and how important our endowment funds continue to be for major projects such as this one. Before we begin, I just want to ask you to make sure that your microphones are on mute. And we are going to have a question and answer period at the end. So please hold your questions until then, and then we'll invite you to use the chat function on your screen to enter the questions. Or if you prefer, you're welcome to simply unmute yourself and ask your question directly. Today we have come together to hear from Laura Muir. Laura is Associate Director of Academic and Public Programs at the Harvard Art Museums. And as many of you know, she was formerly the longtime Assistant Curator of the Busch-Reisinger Museum. Importantly for today, she is the driving force behind and editor of Object Lessons, the Bauhaus and Harvard, and was also the curator of the 2019 exhibition at the Harvard Art Museums, the Bauhaus and Harvard. Laura, can we go to the, thank you. So the Busch-Reisinger Museum has long been defined by the strength of its Bauhaus collection. It is the largest such holdings outside of Germany, more than 32,000 objects and archival materials related to the Bauhaus, 32,000 objects. The project of amassing this collection was launched in 1947 by then curator Charles Kuhn, whose initiative revitalized the museum after World War II amid anti-German sentiment in this country. And as many of you know, The busch-reisinger Museum was formerly known as the Germanic Museum, and the name was changed officially in 1950. We can see here an installation view from the museum's exhibition, The Art of the Bauhaus, in 1951, and perhaps already some recognizable old friends from the busch-reisinger Museum's Bauhaus collection. The work of Bauhäusler, such as Walter Gropius and Annie and Josef Albers, all of whose work can be seen here, have really informed our understanding of German modernism in the United States. And this is a narrative, and one that I'm sure Laura will go into more detail about, but this is a narrative that the Busch-Reisinger Museum and its collection really helped to write. And as I like to say, the Busch-Reisinger Museum not only played a major role in the 20th century in writing the narrative of German art in the United States, but we continue to do so today. And the Bauhaus project is really exemplary of that. So 2019 marked the 100th year anniversary of the Bauhaus School of Art and Design. And so it really offered us an ideal opportunity to examine the Busch-Reisinger's Bauhaus holdings anew. Next slide, please. The exhibition, the related programming, and the volume that Laura will introduce us to today were part of a wider effort inaugurated about 8 years ago. And you have to imagine I was just a few years into my a few months, maybe even weeks into my tenure at the Busch-Reisinger Museum. So it's 2011. I'm fresh, as the Busch-Reisinger curator, and we are paid a visit by a whole contingent of scholars and colleagues from Weimar, the city where the Bauhaus was founded in 1919. And they said, "What are you doing in 2019? And I remember sort of turning to Laura, who was then the assistant curator of the Busch-Reisinger, and saying, "What are we doing in 2019? Like, I just started, like this is 2011, But actually it was great because it planted the seed for us very early that this was really the opportunity with the Centennial in 2019 to really rethink our own collections. And so Laura and I set on a path in order to ensure that the scholarship on and the public access to this material was really in place for the Centennial. And this was all work coming out of the strength of the collection and also drawing on developments in the field since the museum last presented a major show of these holdings in 1971. So you have to imagine 1971 was the last time that the Busch-Reisinger Museum had done a dedicated Bauhaus exhibition. We really started thinking through some of those ideas, as you can see in these images of the galleries. After we reopened the museum in 2014, we featured Bauhaus textiles, works on paper and photography, and really used our permanent collection galleries as a testing ground for the larger special exhibition. And in the upper right, you can also see a wonderful installation that our curatorial fellow Melissa Van Adder did on the work of Carl Grossberg, who was a Bauhaus trained artist, borrowing the works from the Merrill Berman collection and showing those also in our Bauhaus galleries. So really thinking broadly, expansively, and really pushing the scholarship forward. We saw through these presentations a lot of the issues that would become the focus of Laura's exhibition and the publication, the material breadth of the workshops, but also gender disparity at the school and the longstanding impact of its pedagogical models. So all of that really came to the fore through this work that we had done over the years. Next slide. Laura worked very closely with our two curatorial fellows. I mentioned Melissa Van Adder, who's working with Laura in Laura's office on the left. This was a very common scene for me. I just took a snapshot as I walked past them, working diligently on the exhibition, and also Rob Wiesenberger, who I believe many of you met during his tenure at the museum, seen here in the upper right. Next slide, please. And spearheaded by Rob, we launched in 2016 the digital resource, the Bauhaus, a comprehensive and easily searchable database of the collection. So this was really the first major milestone towards our 2019 project, because it made those 32,000 plus related objects accessible to our audiences around the world. Next slide, please. So in short, it was really Laura's vision for the exhibition and this publication that led it to be so incredibly successful. In fact, our opening lecture and other special events quickly sold out. We gained new friends for the museum. Our social media channels were just blowing up about excitement about the Bauhaus project. And really, it's a testament to Laura's many years of hard work on this project that the range of engagements that she'll show you are part of the publication came to be. So work with our conservation team and the Strauss Center, as you can see in the upper left, major treatments, but also films, dance performances, hands-on materials workshops, faculty partnerships, a day-long symposium, walking tours, artist talks. I mean, it was an incredible semester at the Harvard Art Museums. And I'm thrilled to turn it over now to Laura to dig into the publication, which is really a testament to this incredible project, and also how we work at the Harvard Art Museums and what we're doing with our collections, and also with our many partners at the university and in the community. So with that, I turn it over to Laura.
Thank you so much, Lynette, for that introduction, but also for your support of this project and your really crucial collaboration over the course of several years. And I want to thank everyone in the audience today for joining. I'm really delighted to have a chance to give you a preview of the Bauhaus book. It has been a bit, probably not surprisingly, delayed by the pandemic, but it should be available in early spring. It will be distributed by Yale University Press. What you're seeing here is not an actual book, but just a dummy of the cover. So I look forward to holding the actual thing in my hands early next year. Since the quarantine started in March, one of the most enjoyable projects I've been involved with has been the completion of this publication, which involved not only finalizing the manuscript, but also making decisions about the design itself, which happened over email, but also through skipped ahead there, but also through many exchanges of materials that were dropped off and picked up from my front porch by colleagues in our design department. So what is this? And Lynette touched on this, but it will be the first publication devoted to the Busch-Reisinger Museum's Bauhaus publications since 1971. And you see here on your screen that book, which accompanied the exhibition Concepts of the Bauhaus, the Busch-Reisinger Museum collection by John David Farmer. And that book is now pretty dated and the information is not all correct, but it was an incredibly useful overview of the collection. And I refer to it a lot during the development of the exhibition and this publication. And as Lynette has noted, why now? The last year marked the centennial of the founding of the Bauhaus in 1919. And given our holdings, we began to make plans for our own contribution to this global Bauhaus celebration. At that time, I was the assistant curator of the Busch-Reisinger and had been working on these collections for several years. In 2011, I had just completed an exhibition of Lionel Feininger's photographic work, a body of work that's little known, but that he started while he was a master at the Bauhaus. So our Bauhaus Centennial kicked off with the online resource, which was developed by Rob Wiesenberger. And I'll just add that in addition to making this collection of over 30,000 objects accessible, it is the way that we will continue to keep the collection updated and accessible. It's really an incredible resource that does way more than any print publication ever could for such a huge collection. So it really is a key part of our kind of contributions to this Bauhaus initiative. And I really do encourage you to explore it. You see the URL at the bottom of the screen. It's also located under publications on our website. So the next phase of this Centennial project was the Bauhaus and Harvard Exhibition and Programming Initiative. And object lessons really took shape over the course of the exhibition in spring and summer 2019. And the book is a kind of capstone to this larger Centennial project, but one that we hope will have a life that extends well beyond it. As we saw from the really enthusiastic response to the show, there is still a lot of interest in the Bauhaus, and this collection isn't going anywhere. So it will be wonderful to have an updated Bauhaus publication. So I'm going to give you just a little bit of background. The Bauhaus was a pioneering school of modern art, architecture, and design that was active in Germany between 1919 and 1933 when it was closed by the Nazis. It was founded by architect Walter Gropius, who you see here on the left, immediately after the First World War. And Gropius went through some pretty harrowing experiences in the First World War. And when he created the Bauhaus, it was really fueled by this kind of a post-war utopian desire to rebuild the world, to create art, objects, and environments that would revolutionize everyday life. And here you see one of his major contributions, the famous Bauhaus building that he designed in Dessau, Germany, which still stands and still can be visited. The school combined an art academy and an arts and crafts school, and it was organized into workshops devoted to materials such as metal, glass, textiles, pottery, and so on, and where students learned specialized skills as well as working to develop prototypes for industry, which then ideally would be mass produced. Although the school operated for only 14 years, it was incredibly influential and has a long legacy in which Harvard plays an important role. Our 2019 exhibition was comprised of nearly 200 objects by over 70 artists and was drawn almost entirely from the collection of the Busch-Reisinger Museum, with the exception of a very major loan from the Mail Berman collection and a few loans from campus archives. As a major exhibition, as the first major exhibition of this material in nearly 50 years, it presented an opportunity for us to reconsider the collection and its origins, as well as the unique relationship between the Bauhaus and Harvard. So that relationship began in 1930, while the Bauhaus was still in operation in Germany, when the student-run Harvard Society for Contemporary Art organized the first Bauhaus exhibition in the United States. And here you see the small brochure for the show that had a checklist and an essay by the curator, Lincoln Kirstein. The university would later become an unofficial center for the Bauhaus in America when founding director Walter Gropius joined Harvard's Department of Architecture in 1937. After the Second World War, with the aid of Gropius, who you see here on the left, and many other former Bauhaus artists, Harvard's Germanic Museum, today's Busch-Reisinger Museum, established a Bauhaus collection, today the largest of its kind outside of Germany. And on the right, you see a document still in our files, which is the addresses of former Bauhaus artists living in the United States that Walter Gropius provided to Busch-Reisinger Museum curator Charles Kuhn, who wrote to each one of them in order to solicit donations and to enlist their help in this effort. And this is just the first page of that document. But the initiative was remarkably successful. It was a wonderful collaborative effort. And as Lynette has mentioned, it really breathed new life into the Germanic Museum, which since the end of World War II had been struggling to reestablish itself. The collection became the first comprehensive Bauhaus study collection, kind of the first Bauhaus archive, a decade before the German Bauhaus archives were established. And it has played an important role in the legacy and reception of the Bauhaus in the United States. And here you see curator Charles Kuhn with Julia Feininger in the library of the Busch-Reisinger Museum with some of those early Bauhaus acquisitions. And this is the place where people access the Bauhaus collection initially in Adolphus Busch Hall. Our recent exhibition explored the school's activities in Germany as well as its influence in the United States. It was an opportunity to take a fresh look at this historic collection and to highlight artists and media that had previously been neglected, especially work by women artists and materials such as photography and textiles. Here you see some material produced at schools in the United States influenced by Bauhaus pedagogy. Much of this material hadn't been shown in probably 50 years. And here you have some materials from the Ati Berger archive, the Bauhaus weaver, and we have the largest surviving collection of her work, and it's still understudied. And it was a wonderful opportunity to kind of showcase that. So this aligns with our current museum thinking about reframing the collection in a way that avoids centering the same stories, figures, and histories. The Bauhaus story has always been a Gropius story, and one that he very much helped to write, especially in the United States. And our 2019 exhibition very consciously sought to bring other figures, narratives, and types of objects into the spotlight. And these ideas also inform the programs that we developed alongside the exhibition. From the beginning, we knew, skipped ahead. From the beginning, we knew that we wanted the programming to be a central element of the project. And early on, we invited colleagues from across campus to collaborate through their teaching or their own exhibitions and events. And here you see in this upper left picture, this was a workshop that we held in 2016 for faculty, colleagues, and other campus colleagues to introduce the exhibition and hopefully plant the seeds for collaborative projects in 2019. And that seemed to have worked because it really became a campus initiative with faculty developing new courses at the GSD, History of Art and Architecture, Art, Film, and Visual Studies. There were related exhibitions at the Harvard Law School and Houghton Library, and even a student dance performance inspired by the famous Bauhaus Metal Party, which you see at the center of your screen. At the museum, we developed an array of programming that included an artist talk by Judith Raum as part of our opening celebration for the exhibition, a film program curated by our colleague, Professor Laura Muir, based on her new research on film, a series of materials lab workshops, gallery talks, walking tours of the Harvard Graduate Center, which was designed by Gropius's architectural firm in 1950, and a major symposium. And you see the program for the symposium on the right of your screen. What we didn't do was publish an exhibition catalog, in part because we had this fabulous website. Instead, we opted for a different kind of publication that could capture both the exhibition and programming, and which would benefit from the opportunities of close looking, teaching, and conversations across campus. And this also reflected my move from the Busch-Reisinger Museum to my role in the Division of Academic and Public Programs, and that this was really a cross-departmental effort. And from the beginning, we knew that we wanted to publish the symposium papers, which very powerfully demonstrate how the collection continues to spark new research. The essays, these essays form the core of the volume, and as you can see, they also inspired the title for the book, Object Lessons. But we didn't want to simply publish symposium proceedings, which can seem very kind of dry and uninspiring. So it evolved into a much more multifaceted and dynamic concept, which felt more Bauhaus-like. So how to capture all of this in a book? We didn't have any models for this type of publication. We didn't have a clear picture of what it would look like when we began. And the structure for this book emerged through a truly collaborative effort. And I'm really grateful to Lynette and also Melissa Vinader, who was the fellow for the exhibition. And in the early stages, that was incredibly helpful. And then as it moved along, I'm also very grateful to my colleagues in the editorial department, especially Micah Buse and Sarah Kushner, as well as our designer, Zach Jensen, and his colleague, Becky Hunt. And also, I can't not mention our amazing curatorial assistant, Bridget Hintz, who I hope might be in the audience today, who, in addition to attending to all of the administrative details of this publication absolutely meticulously, was really an invaluable sounding board throughout the process. So the physical design of the book was inspired by the idea that it brings together all these diverse elements, really kind of a collection of different kinds of documents. And that gave our designer, Zach Jensen, the idea to propose what is called a Swiss binding, where the front of the cover opens completely to reveal a stack of papers or the book block. And it also allows the pages to open very flat. And here you see the book dummy, how that kind of comes away from the spine to reveal this sort of stack of material. Zach also proposed the use of different paper stocks to signal the transition between sections. So the blue is lightweight uncoated paper for the essays, and the yellow and pink denotes heavier weight matte coated paper for the plates and programming photographs. And in this close-up of the dummy, you can kind of see the transition from between these different kinds of papers. So now I'll take you on a quick virtual tour of the book itself. Right after the front matter, Martha's foreword, Lynette's preface, and my acknowledgements, there is a section of full bleed images documenting the programming and installation. And here is just a sampling. An image of Judith Raum, who was our opening night speaker. She gave a wonderful artist talk. The next morning, she gave a seminar in our Art Study Center on the textiles of Otto Berger to a group of Harvard students. We got some great documentation of that. This is a photograph of one of the walking tours that our graduate intern, Charlotte Lieb from the GSD, took visitors on of the Harvard Graduate Center, which again was designed by Gropius and his team in 1950. And there are actually some really wonderful resonances between this building and the Bauhaus building in Dessau. A couple of images of the student choreographed and costumed Bauhaus dance performance, which is actually on the ramp to the Carpenter Center. Some photographs of a couple of the materials lab workshops, which were inspired by the teaching of Joseph and Annie Albers. And then we had some images of the installation exhibition itself. I hope some of you were able to see it in person. I have to say this spring, I was feeling so grateful that we had a chance to actually show the Bauhaus exhibition and people had a chance to see it. So then comes the section of essays, which is introduced by my essay on the history of the Bauhaus and Harvard, exhibiting the Bauhaus and Harvard, starting in 1930 with that Harvard Society of Contemporary Art exhibition right up to the 2019 exhibition, and sort of looking at the role of the institution and these exhibitions in shaping the American reception of the Bauhaus. This is followed by essays that were based on the 7 papers that were given at the symposium, which I've highlighted here in blue. This is the program, but here are the 7 essays as they appear in the table of contents of the book. And these each address a single object or a group of objects. There are actually 4 that are related to German topics and 3 related to Bauhaus afterlife in the United States. And all of them, the topics are really understudied. So it's a wonderful body of new research by a range of established and emerging scholars. The essays feature works by several women artists, including Lucia Moholy, Ati Berger, Marina Brandt, and Ruth Asawa, and 2 essays dealing with artworks commissioned for the Harvard Graduate Center. And this is what they look like here. And down below here, you see the Joseph Albers brick relief, which is still in situ in the Harvard Graduate Center. This is a wonderful essay by the Bauhaus scholar Annie Bornoff on a little known Bauhaus picture album belonging to Ati Berger, and a wonderful essay by Jordan Trawler, a Harvard grad who's working in Austria now, on Ruth Asawa. And these are integrated with some shorter essays that reflect, we called them kind of the mini essays that reflect on the film series up here, where we actually screened films that were shown at the Bauhaus at various moments in its history, the materials lab workshops that were held, the conservation that was done on certain objects here. I know you all have had a chance to hear from Kate Smith on her work on verdure earlier this fall. And then on the teaching that took place during the run of the show. This is a wonderful essay by our colleague Katarina Byrne in Art, Film, and Visual Studies about the seminar that she and Laura Fromm led, but also how our collection has influenced her own work as an artist. And that's the essay that we end the volume with. Then comes the plate section where we feature 41 objects that ranged from the earliest work at the Bauhaus in Weimar to objects that demonstrate the influence of Bauhaus pedagogy in the United States. They represent a range of media and products of the various workshops. They include familiar objects, as well as some lesser known objects, but also new acquisitions, so things that have been acquired since that 1971 publication, but also some discoveries. And I think the plate section will really be this kind of beautiful standalone kind of picture book of the Bauhaus, but it also links up to the essays in the volume. Almost every object is, serves as an illustration to the essays in the volume. Oh, here's one of the discoveries. On the right here, you see this iconic photograph by Moholy-Nagy, which was among the hundreds of photographs in the Gropius archive, kind of not matted, just kind of in glassine sleeves and unidentified as Moholy-Nagy until I came across it by chance, and just was really kind of thrilled to recognize this photograph and then to turn it over and to have the red Moholy-Nagy rubber stamp on it. So that was really exciting to be able to bring that out and exhibit it. We feature a lot of our textiles. That's a real strength of the collection, but not only these full-size wall hangings like this Annie Albers piece, but also some of the many studies that she did for textiles, which is a really incredible resource that's part of the collection. These are 2 works made in the United States. On the left, a wonderful work by Ruth Asawa that she made at Black Mountain College, and a work by Irving Tietel, who is kind of an unknown artist, made at Brooklyn College, which was also very much kind of influenced by Bauhaus pedagogy, but I think wonderful to see the 2 works compositions on newsprint that really resonate together nicely. On the left, another student exercise from Newcomb College in New Orleans. And on the right, another discovery within the collection, a really stunning photogram by Arthur Siegel. Siegel learned photography and especially the photogram technique from Moholy-Nagy at the new Bauhaus in Chicago. And he gave this photograph to the German art museum curator, Alexander Dorner, who subsequently gave his materials, or his widow did, to the Busch-Reisinger Museum. And this photograph had been accessioned, but never actually moved from the file folder in the Dorner archive, where it stayed for decades until I was able to track it down, and it received some TLC from our conservation lab and was really a stunning addition to the Bauhaus presentation in 2019. And then finally, we have a fold out for the Verdure painting because of its kind of interesting format. It sort of is the one piece that gets a fold out in the plate section. So the cover design, I think, really neatly ties together the Bauhaus and Harvard with details of Lucia Maholi's photograph of her Bauhaus living room here on the right. See the full print here, and which is furnished with objects produced by the various Bauhaus workshops. And on the left, Robert DeMoro's photograph of one of the dorm rooms at the Harvard Graduate Center with a bedspread that was designed by former Bauhaus weaver, Ani Albers. And we actually have these bedspreads in our collection. I think there were 3 colors, and we have examples of 2 of the colors. But there were still more decisions after this. I'm nearing the end though. For the end papers, we decided to use some of the Bauhaus wallpapers designed by Joseph Albers. And we have this wonderful set of wallpapers that were donated by Albers himself in 1949. And this was just a nice way to work in another kind of object. And wallpaper, incidentally, was the Bauhaus's most successful product in terms of sales. And finally, we end where we began. The Bauhaus and Harvard history began with the facsimile of the Harvard Society for Contemporary Art Bauhaus exhibition brochure, which is almost exactly contemporary with the Albers wallpaper. So with that, I would like to just thank you all for allowing me to share this really exciting project with you. And I'm very happy to take questions. And I'll stop sharing my screen.
Great, thank you, Laura. So just a reminder, you can put your questions for Laura in the chat, which I'll kind of keep an eye on here. Or if you'd rather just unmute yourself and jump in, feel free to do so.
Can I ask a question?
Of course.
Absolutely.
What is there much of a connection between Black Mountain College and Harvard and in the Bauhaus area, in the sense of instructors or work that came from there? Anything that you can speak to?
Sure, thank you for that question. The Black Mountain College is actually very well represented in the Bauhaus collection, and Lynette, please feel free to chime in here, but because of Joseph Albers, who was kind of the key connector between the Bauhaus and Black Mountain College, and through his contributions to the Bauhaus Collection Initiative at Harvard, we have not only incredible materials from representing Joseph Albers' work, Ani Albers' work, but also the work of their students at Black Mountain College, such as Ruth Asawa. And so we actually, in the exhibition, we had a whole section devoted to some of that work. And we're really, really fortunate to have, I think, something like 13 early studies by Ruth Asawa in the collection. And that's actually the subject of one of the essays in the volume.
I just would add, we also, in 2019, not only did our own Bauhaus exhibition with the collections, but we also lent very generously to the many Bauhaus exhibitions that were happening really all over. And one of the most popular artists that was requested was actually Ruth Asawa, who also, there was an exhibition around the same time, a retrospective at the Pulitzer Foundation in St. Louis, but we have such wonderful holdings of her work that right now we've pretty much lent out everything, and so everything has to rest for a while. But our collection was featured very prominently in the Black Mountain College exhibition that the ICA did as well a couple of years ago, really relied on many of the key works in the busch-reisinger collection as well. So I think what Laura's exhibition did so wonderfully is really started out in Weimar and in Dessau, and but then took us through, as the catalog does, all the way through to the American legacy of the Bauhaus, and that's something that our collection can do so uniquely. There was a question in the chat about whether or not you collaborated with the music department during the exhibition.
We did not. That's a really great question. I think we might have had some of those colleagues on our list, and it just never got off the ground. But that we did really try to make it a very kind of interdisciplinary effort. So I would have liked to have seen where that went, but that is something we actually do a lot of collaboration on other projects at the museum, but it didn't really happen for the Bauhaus exhibition.
Who else has Bauhaus work, strong collection? Does MoMA?
MoMA has, yeah, MoMA does. Art Institute of Chicago has some good things. The Getty Museum has great holdings in the museum, but also in the Research Institute. And then of course, there's the German Bauhaus archives in Weimar and Berlin. Did everyone have a chance to see the exhibition?
I did.
For some of you that are, I can see your screens here.
I would have liked to have seen more objects, perhaps. Not wall pieces, but other objects that they might have made.
Like design objects?
Yes.
Yeah.
I thought it was a little light on that.
Yeah, I mean, the exhibition was really a reflection of the collection itself, and also did have to do with the condition of the objects. So we have other examples of the ceramics, which I would have loved to have been able to show, but you can imagine what these objects had to go through to get from Germany and to the United States, and a lot of them didn't make it in the best condition. So yeah, I would have loved to have had more objects in the exhibition as well, but it really did reflect what we were able to acquire through that initial collecting initiative. A lot of things came from Gropius himself, but then other former Bauhaus affiliates.
Was a lot destroyed during the Nazi era, or it just disappeared? Was it was actually destroyed?
That's a good question. I think a lot of it was, just didn't survive because of the circumstances of having to move or having to leave things behind. There were, the material that were removed, the Bauhaus material that was removed from the public collections as part of the degenerate art action. That wasn't destroyed, but it was a way that kind of took the material away from collections, and some of it kind of never has resurfaced. I don't know, Lynette, do you know of Bauhaus, like things actually being destroyed as part of a degenerate art action on the part of the Nazis?
No, I mean, in some ways, the degenerate art campaign also focused a lot on painting and sculpture. And so, things like the design objects, the ones that we were lucky to receive at the time, coming directly from the artists and the makers, and actually show, our wonderful Annie Alber's tapestry that shows that she, put her flower vase on it on her piano, and you can sort of see that ring. So I think in terms of the destruction of objects, it largely had to do with their, just their sort of material life. I think the Otti Berger archive is a great example, because Otti Berger was murdered as a Jew in Auschwitz, and it was her partner who held on to her archive, and then it ended up in the Busch-Reisinger Museum collection. So the care and dedication of the artists, but also their heirs, or someone like Derner, for example, who held on to material made it possible that we still have the holdings that we have. Weimar, for example, the museum in Weimar that recently reopened, they collected that work, already in the 20s, and most of it managed, to survive the war, and that's gone on display now again. So it's, it really sort of depends what work you're talking about and what happened to that individual artist.
Hello, I don't know if you can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, this is Kit Dreyer. The Albers Foundation in Connecticut has quite a collection of furniture. If that's a helpful comment.
Yes, and we've worked very closely with the Albers Foundation in the past. So I should say, one thing we decided to do with this project was to really focus on our collection. So to say, of course, there have been incredible Bauhaus exhibitions, that we have also been lenders to, but we really wanted to focus on the strengths of our collection, which again, might be very different than one might expect if you were pulling together a show based on the collections that are out there.
Right, I would agree with that. The fabulous exhibition that the Museum of Modern Art did in 2009 did just that, and it also versions of it traveled around Europe. So we knew we couldn't do that again, and we didn't want to do that again. But the Albers Foundation does really have a spectacular collection. It's wonderful that I feel like that foundation was formed after our collection was formed. And I think we're feeling very lucky that we have the Albers material that we have, and that they were so generous to us. But then I think the things that they lived with and had in their home, that ended up in the Albers Foundation. I was going to mention one of the kind of key Black Mountain College objects is Ani Albers' first weaving that she did in the United States at Black Mountain College called Monte Alban. And we featured that in the exhibition, and that's really kind of a real masterpiece of the collection.
So I'm going to jump in with some questions from the chat. Here's a one to really test you, Laura. There's the question of what are the signature identifiers, characteristics of the Bauhaus? And you can say,
okay, how much time do I have now? Well, I think it was really, when I mentioned it was Gropius's idea to really kind of think about, how do you kind of start from zero? How do you rebuild after the destruction of the First World War? And there was really just an interest in creating, functional objects that were, very beautiful, and maybe not beautiful in an ornate sense, but, had beautiful, forms, and were made out of not necessarily the most expensive material, but used material, very intelligently. So I think, it really like the form and the function, and, thinking about materials very deeply and using them in appropriate ways. And the architecture itself was also, very kind of streamlined with the kind of lots of windows, fresh air, kind of natural light. Those are sort of some of the hallmarks of Bauhaus architecture and design.
I was hoping, Laura, and since we have you here as our not just Bauhaus expert, but also photography expert, you mentioned a couple of the discoveries that you made in the archives. And I was thinking it might be helpful to hear from you, why something like that happened, specifically to photographs in the collection, like, the seagull and the and the Maholinage that were sort of rediscovered. I always say the busch-reisinger is the collection that keeps on giving, because there was so much incredible material that was amassed. But maybe you could speak to that.
Yeah, I think it's really, the volume of the material. The photographic archive that is part of the Bauhaus collection is really Gropius's archive. And he didn't give it as part of his collection in 1969. It actually was a more recent gift from his widow, Isa Gropius, in 1981. And I think it was something like 3 feet of photographs, a stack of photographs like that. And it has just taken us years and years to go through it, to organize it. And there are, multiple versions of a single photograph, and you'll have sort of the vintage original photograph printed by Lucia Moholy, who was the great documentarian of Gropius's Bauhaus buildings. And then you'll have multiple copies of it. And one of the joys for me has been to look at these photographs really closely, just not only the images, but you turn the photograph over and it's covered with incredible, stamps and annotations, inscriptions and stickers. And it really shows you the life of these photographs. I think, the reason we are, and I'm sure there are still things there that can be discovered, is just that there is just such a volume of material. And Melissa Vanatter did a really incredible job of going through all of the pulling out all of the Lucia Moholy photographs and cataloging them. And that was a real goal of our exhibition, was to really foreground her work and her contribution, which is often just sort of Gropius gets the credit for that. But there are still things to find. We don't have any, well, we didn't have a work by Walter Peterhans, who was hired to teach photography at the Bauhaus in 1929. That was when the photography department was actually established. And during the course of this project, I came across a really beautiful photograph that he made of one of the sort of studios in the Bauhaus building in Dessau. So yeah, it's kind of an exciting thought that probably there's more to come. And the Dorner archive, where we found the Siegel photograph, is a humongous collection that could still, there are still discoveries to be made.
Thank you. So we have a question about why was there no Bauhaus exhibition since the 1971 exhibition, or why do you think that might be?
Mm-hmm. I think it's probably because there were other Bauhaus related exhibitions that happened. There were actually, we have huge collections of Lionel Feininger. We have his archive, huge collections of Paul Klee, and we continue to have exhibitions of individual artists during that time. And we say that it's the first major exhibition in 50 years. There were maybe some smaller installations, but it's a good question, because I think it would have been something that would have been popular. But it also was, 1971 was basically the end of Charles Kuhn's tenure at the Busch-Reisinger Museum. There was a new curator there, but Charles Kuhn, who had established this collection, was sort of the curator emeritus. He contributed to that catalog. He had retired after, over 30 years as curator, and John David Farmer did this project, but then he left. And then there was sort of a series of new curators. And I think there was maybe not someone else to kind of take up the Bauhaus baton in the same way, but it's a great question.
Just a question, you had talked about the foundation of the collection during Charles Kuhn's tenure. There was a question about whether Chick Austin was involved at all.
Not. Did someone want to add to that?
No.
Thanks, Sally. I didn't think so.
Chick Austin at the Boston Athenaeum, is that?
The
Oh,
Wadsworth.
sorry, not the Boston, the Wadsworth Athenaeum. That actually was one of the venues of, I believe, some of the early Bauhaus exhibitions. So that, I mean, he was interested in this material and he was trained at Harvard, but in terms of his having a role in this, the development of our collection, not really.
Great. So we have time for maybe one more question. If someone's got one.
I might just add that you probably know that there's a thriving organization in Asheville, North Carolina, which carries on the Black Mountain everything collection and history and so on. And it's called Black Mountain College Museum and Art Center. And it's just thriving and growing, and they have their own collection, so of all kinds of things. So
Have you been? Have you been?
Oh, yes. And they organize conferences and publish and show exhibitions and so on. And they're very knowledgeable, and they're getting wonderful contribution, financial support from that whole community, the Black Mountain community. So there was a question about Black Mountain.
Yes, and I think one of the things that's been so wonderful about the Bauhaus Centennial last year is that it really connected so many institutions, small, big, you know, really around the world who are working on Bauhaus and the Bauhaus legacy, and just connected scholars and collectors in a way that I think, you know, hadn't necessarily happened before. So we would often be asked to lend works to a particular exhibition, but this really gave everyone, and that's why I sort of always joke, you know, when our Weimar colleagues showed up in 2011, you know, it became clear to us, like, oh, right, you know, this is something we need to aim for also.
Right.
Because such an important, essential part of our collection, but also because we have a lot to contribute to this broader field and to the ongoing scholarship. And of course, our mission is to make our collection as accessible as possible and to contribute to the scholarship, not just obviously at Harvard, but really that's happening everywhere. So I know we're all very excited to hold the book in our hands in the new year. It's really going to be beautiful. And I think an example, and that's really how Laura conceived of it as in her role now in the Division of Academic and Public Programs, as she mentioned, as a way to really show beyond the Bauhaus, but what we're doing with the collections at the Harvard Art Museums and building those partnerships on campus and beyond. So I want to thank you all so much for joining us today, and to thank you for your ongoing support of the Harvard Art Museums, and wish you a very happy and safe holiday. And I know that we look forward to seeing you again in the new year.